Hello and good evening. Welcome to World Today. This is your one-stop show for all that happens in the world of news, from politics to COVID to the vaccination drive picking up pace not only in India but also the rest of the world. Well, we cut all the noise and bring you stories as it happens on ground zero. We would also be taking a look at sports along with some interesting stories that are beyond the headlines. I am Anil Thomas and we've got much more over the next 1 hour. But first up, the top stories at the top of this hour. Union External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar reiterates that the future of Afghanistan should not be a return to its past. Speaking at a session on peace in Kabul at Raisina Dialogue on day 4, urged the international community to take care not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. In US, Indianapolis police shooting leaves 8 people dead at FedEx facility. The suspected gunman in the shooting killed himself. Police say the authorities did not feel there was an active threat to the community anymore. US President Joe Biden proposes strategic stability dialogue with Moscow after announcing sanctions against Russia, expels 10 diplomats, restricts trading and blacklists 32 individuals over election meddling and cyber attack. 2 countries discuss possibility of a summit meeting in Europe this summer. Variants fuel COVID-19 surge world over with 13 crore 96 lakh cases. Death toll inches closer to the 30 lakh mark. Scientists voice optimism over vaccines as public health measures remain critical to curbing infections. Shortage of intubation drugs threaten Brazil's health sector as COVID-19 cases rise. Brazilian health workers forced to intubate patients without the aid of sedatives. Hospitals and state governments risk running out of critical medicines. And in sports, English club Arsenal and Manchester United reached the last 4 of the UEFA Europa League. United to face Italian club AS Roma, while Arsenal to lock horns with Spanish club Villarreal. Well, let's begin the bulletin with this big breaking story that's coming in. United Kingdom's Home Minister has approved the extradition of Nirav Modi. Nirav was wanted in India on charges of fraud and money laundering in the Punjab National Bank scam case. Well, for more on this story, we've got our correspondent Abhishek just standing by to give us the latest. Abhishek, it's a massive vindication for the Indian government, especially, this particular news coming in.
This is not only the government, but all the agencies and detailed investigation that the agencies have done, and they have submitted all the documentation to the agencies of UK and in the court of UK. That is kind of getting approval from the government. Also, earlier, a court in UK has already allowed extradition of Nirav Modi, and all the excuses that Nirav Modi wanted the court to believe on, that the condition in Indian courts are not good, or he may not get the proper legal recourses to defend himself, that those were not accepted and they were just brushed off, and he was asked to go and defend himself in front of the Indian legal agencies and Indian judiciary. Meanwhile, the file was still waiting at the tables of UK Home Minister, and now when the file has been approved for the extradition of Nirav Modi, one can expect that sooner or later Nirav Modi will have to face the Indian judiciary and Indian law agencies.
Also considering the fact, when you look at the lawyers, especially for Nirav Modi, arguing for the fact that, there has been overcrowded prisons in India, what were the reasons for this particular point to be, discarded there? And do you feel that is there another window that's left for Nirav Modi now to, now to take his plea further to delay his extradition to India?
In fact, it was just a lame excuse from the side of Modi that the condition of Indian jails are not as good and as appropriate as the conditions in UK jail, so that he could, delay his the extradition on these grounds. But then CBI officials and the ED officials and the Indian agencies had to submit the sale where he is expected to be kept when back in India, and the UK judiciary was very much satisfied with the condition of jail. All the video footages that were submitted were almost appropriate condition, and the standards they were very much appropriate for any inmates to reside and live there. So on those charges, those grounds were actually not considered, and Nirav Modi had to be, put for the extradition. Now the file was waiting with the UK Home Minister, and now when this file also has been approved, there are still legal recourses left for the Nirav Modi. And can still appeal in the higher judiciary, High Court and Supreme Court of UK, and we'll have to wait for some more time before Nirav Modi could be extradited to India finally.
Okay, considering, what's the timeline that one would see, now when you look at this particular story, especially when it comes to extradition treaties, how successful have we been, especially, extraditing people who are accused in India from United Kingdom?
So Anil, we have been very successful in convincing the judiciary primarily, and all the, basic accusers that Nirav Modi was trying to hide behind. So once these cases have been established, his character and the merit of the case has been established. So now onwards, there will be only hearing on the merit of case. So we can hope that there are still hurdles and judiciary, gap where Nirav Modi could hide for some more time. But as we progress and the judiciary level goes up, it will not be as long and as cumbersome process to establish his guilt in front of UK judiciary from the side of Indian probe agencies, because already the merit of the case has been established. Indian jail conditions have been established. His extradition legalities have also been established. So it's just the legal recourses that he's trying to test for some more time. And we'll have to see how soon these higher judiciary of UK will be listening to the cases, and we can expect that as soon as this decision will be happening in favor of Indian.
Okay, now, two perspectives. One, now that, the extradition has been signed for Nirav Modi's return to India, does that make this case stronger for the ED and the CBI, especially when they look at Mehul Choksi, who's in Antigua? Does that put more pressure there, especially on the Antiguan government when it comes to sending back Mehul Choksi too? And also, looking at the way, this particular victory has come about, does that put pressure on Vijay Mallya and his legal team too?
So, Anil, again, on this discussion, we can have 2-3 perspectives actually. First, the Antiguan government, they have their own sovereign system, and they have their own judiciary system. But however, we can be hopeful that with this legality hurdle being crossed in UK, though at a very primary level, and now UK Home Secretary also approving the file of extradition of Nirav Modi, the Indian investigative agency, they have a moral high ground, and they can now pursue the cases in different places in the world where other culprits of the same scam are hiding, like in Antigua and Barbados, where this Mehul Choksi, his uncle, is hiding. Another perspective is we still have to wait because we have seen in the case of Kingfisher and King Baron Vijay Mallya that it has been almost 2 years, so more than 2 years when his extradition files were approved. But still he is trying to delay his extradition in the process of judiciary in the UK, where the higher judiciary in UK is still not taken any stance whether to extradite Vijay Mallya, or still there are chances where one should not extradite Vijay Mallya. So, though there has been primarily, we can say that there is a vindication of Indian probe agencies. There is still moral win for the Indian agencies, but still we have a long legal battle ahead. We'll have to take care of that also before it could be extradited back to India.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you and appreciate you joining us this evening with those updates there on that big story that's developing there. Nirav Modi's extradition being signed by the UK Home Secretary Preeti Patel there. And, Nirav Modi has been accused of frauding the Indian banks worth 13,570 crore rupees. Well, let's now shift focus and take a look at our next big story. Well, during a discussion over the political and security situation on Afghanistan in Raisina dialogue, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has reiterated the ongoing peace process in Afghanistan must be Afghan-led and owned.
It's important that the rest of us, the international community, we have a clear sense of, it is finally for the Afghan people, obviously, to determine the future. But I don't think we should let the achievements of the last 20 years, and again, I'm not by any means suggesting that the last 20 years were perfect. In fact, we have our own share of complaints and issues about how things were conducted in the last 20 years. But the fact is, many things have happened in the last 20 years. They are reality today. They are part of, what are the legitimate aspirations and the assumptions of the Afghan people.
Well, External Affairs Minister also said that the efforts of the last 20 years must not go in vain and Afghanistan needs peace within and around.
The neighbors of Afghanistan, unfortunately, have very often played a very negative role. So, which is the point, therefore, I had made in Dushanbe, that Afghanistan needs a double peace. It needs a peace within, it needs a peace around.
Well, Afghan's NSA, Hamadullah Mohib, said that the peace process must include all the different groups. No group or faction should or can be excluded for a peaceful and stable Afghanistan.
There is consensus in the region that came out from the Troika dialogue discussion, and that was which was announced, which we welcomed as well, is a united, democratic and sovereign Afghanistan. And I think we will work towards achieving that, and we are in the best position to do that.
Well, speaking on Taliban, Iran Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said that Taliban must not create vacuum and must negotiate right away.
We believe that whatever we think of the Taliban, it is a reality in Afghanistan and they have to be engaged. But based on democratic terms, not based on anybody's individual self-serving terms. If the Taliban want to go back to the 90s, whether their ideology has changed or not, whether their approach has changed or not, but it is impossible to go back to the 90s.
Well, Iranian Foreign Minister further added that another war in the region cannot be tolerated. There are 3 million Afghan refugees in Iran and the region cannot bear more burden.
We cannot create a vacuum. Taliban should not be asking for a vacuum. Taliban should start negotiating now with the government of Afghanistan, with the people of Afghanistan, with various groups in Afghanistan. There should be broad-based conversations right now. Waiting for an eventuality where there is a vacuum and Taliban want to fill that vacuum is disaster. That is a recipe for a new war in Afghanistan, and we in the region cannot tolerate. We simply, with 3 million Afghan refugees in Iran, we cannot bear more burden. This is just overwhelming for the region. The same is true for Pakistan.
Well, he also said that Chabahar is not against China. Rather, Chabahar is a place where all countries can come together in order to help Afghanistan. India is playing an active role in Chabahar.
Chabahar is open for cooperation for everybody. Chabahar is not against China, is not against Gwadar. Chabahar is a place where we can all come together in order to help Afghanistan, to help development and prosperity in the region. India is playing an active role in Chabahar. The Chinese are interested in playing an active role elsewhere in Iran and also in Chabahar. And there is enough for a lot of people to engage, and there is enough in Afghanistan to help promote peace and stability and economic development in the entire region.
Well, there are four important aspects to this particular decision by the Biden administration that one needs to look at. How one goes about looking at this particular decisions that have been taken. There are four elements to it. What's the first element that one looks at when you look at this particular element? Was it dangerous to announce a deadline, which many expected that, a deadline would not come into play. But was it a mistake there to announce a deadline when it comes to pull out of troops? Why do I say that? Because there is a date that's been fixed that's called complete withdrawal by September 11th. That's the 20th anniversary of the World Trade attack. Also, that date is being celebrated by the militant groups as victory over United States. So it's a big cause of concern when one looks at these particular things. But, when you look at this particular withdrawal, does this withdrawal, also give equal security vacuum? That's the big question that one looks at. The second big question. Why do I say that? Because it creates space for disruptors to somewhere step in. The CIA director, William Burns, has acknowledged that when the United States withdraws, the US government's ability to collect and act on threats will diminish. But he's also promised that the CIA will maintain capabilities in Afghanistan. Taliban now is in a different zone. It is a temptation now for the Taliban, emboldened by what they see as victory over the world's largest and most technologically advanced country, to attack troops on the ground without any consequences. Also, a look at neighbors Pakistan, their gains and their concerns. This is a moment of both vindication as well as concern in Islamabad. It was Pakistan that persuaded the Taliban to do a deal with the Trump administration. Also, a US withdrawal would mean Pakistan will need to shoulder the entire burden of the chaos that follows. Now, looking at what are the logistics, of this particular withdrawal, how does one go about when you look at this logistic withdrawal that is there? Somewhere around 2,500 US troops plus 16,000 civilian contractors and their equipment must be evacuated from Afghanistan. Along with this, there are 7,000 NATO soldiers who depend on the US military for their transport of troops and equipment. It is therefore a huge and delicate logistical operation that must be carried out, and the military needs at least 3 months to complete it in an orderly and secure manner. Well, what about US credibility? That's the big question that everyone is talking about. With the war at best a stalemate, I would say, and the Taliban in the ascendancy after 20 years of fighting, it is easy for them and other enemies of the US to frame this withdrawal as a triumph over a world superpower, a fact not lost by Biden's political opposition, that's the Republican Party. Many Republicans have spoken forcefully about the withdrawal impact of US influence and the credibility around the world. So it's not going to be very easy as one looks at when you look at these particular four questions that I have raised, especially when it comes to the withdrawal deadline that's been set by the Biden administration for the 11th of September. Well, also now, to get a perspective of what it could mean, how do this, today's dialogue there, especially in Raisina dialogue, how does that come about? I've got somebody who's an expert on the subject joining us this evening on World Today, Lieutenant General Ravi Shawee, who's also the Center Head, National Security and International Affairs, VIF, joining us this evening on World Today. Good evening, sir. Welcome to World Today. My first question to you, Dr. S. Jaishankar's thoughts or comments, especially on the peace process in Afghanistan that must be Afghan-owned and Afghan-led. How does that look possible on the ground?
It appears to be very difficult now to say that the ongoing process will be Afghan-led and Afghan-owned. Because you see, as you very correctly mentioned, I think the announcing of the date of withdrawal by Joe Biden has been, in my view, less than prudent.
Okay.
But when you look at the American point of view, as he very correctly mentioned, that he's the fourth president in whose tenure the money and the lives have been spent in Afghanistan. If you look at it from the American point of view, they have put $1 trillion approximately the cost of this particular involvement, and 2,200 soldiers killed, which of course he showed very graphically when he went to Arlington Cemetery. So the point is that he very correctly mentioned that political compulsions and the general public is not, very keen for this war to be prolonged. but the consequences for the Afghanistan are going to be very dire. You see, once you announce the exact date of withdrawal, actually it has been shifted from 1st of the May to 11th of September, then your leverages with the Taliban completely go off.
Okay.
And the Taliban have not shown, any enthusiasm now, especially at this moment now. They know that they have all the cards with them, and there is hardly any sort of a inducement or leverage against them. So they are emboldened, actually, if you ask me. As the things stand today, the statistics reveal that 19% of Afghanistan is under their influence, and about, I think, 33% is with the government, and the rest of the area is contested. So it's a precarious position. Actually, the requirement of the Western troops, that is including the Americans and the NATO forces, as you mentioned, did give a boost to the Afghan security forces. And mind you, the Afghan security forces have not done badly. I mean, in my view, they have done very, very gallantly. They have stood their ground. But there are limits to their, perseverance also. They require support from the Americans, actually, in terms of air support, intelligence. And what is most required by them is the money. Actually, the funding is most important. It comes to almost $5 billion a year. So one does hope that if the Americans withdraw and the Western forces withdraw from this country, they would continue to support financially the Afghan security forces. Otherwise, there is a distinct possibility of their crumbling down. And the second point, which is very important, is the air support, which was essential absolutely for the operations of these special special op troops of the Afghans, who are very closely supported by the Americans. So with all these things which I have mentioned, you see, it will be very difficult for the Afghans to stand their ground. But again, let's not underestimate them. In Najibullah's time, when the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan and left the Afghans to their own devices, they surprised the whole world by standing fast. I don't know what will happen at this time, but they'll have a very difficult task on their hand. And as you very correctly mentioned, in the next 3 months now, from now onwards, there would be more involvement. There will be more thought about withdrawing the troops rather than, they're coming into the play. And the Taliban have completely lost interest as far as the peace process is concerned. But my heart goes out to the people of Afghanistan. You see, I have seen the Afghans in last 20 years. I was there 2 days after the throwing out of the Taliban. I wish they had been convincingly and defeated rather than being pushed into Pakistan. You see, there is a new generation which has come up, which is educated, which has seen more liberal time despite best effort of the Taliban to destroy them, to cause disruptions. The women folk have come up, universities have come up, the middle class has come up. So there is a terrible fear. So I actually, if you ask me, empathize with them. And in this environment, India has played a very positive role. You see, whenever you go to any bureaucracy, a large number has been trained by us. Diplomats have been trained by us. Teachers have been trained by us. The army has been trained by us. So if you generally go around Afghanistan, they have an extremely positive view as far as India is concerned. So that particular way, they look to us for help, which I am afraid would be very difficult to give, but we still should be able to give that. And as very correctly brought out by the foreign minister, we'll continue to stand for a peace process which is Afghan owned and which is Afghan operated and Afghan discussed. I mean, there is no place for disruptor which they like to get in, especially our Western neighbors. I think they are going to come in a big way. Although, mind you, once the instability starts and the civil war starts in the real earnest, which I'm afraid may break out after the withdrawal of the American troops, I don't know what shape the whole thing will take place.
Listening today to the Afghan National Security Advisor, he clearly indicated that, the process can only be possible only if we include different groups of the Taliban or different groups of, all the militant groups. Do you see a possibility of getting all of them on board, considering now that, Biden has announced a date, and, do you see them, that's just not possible that, the Taliban will come on board to discuss anything like this?
I don't think Taliban will come to discuss, because Taliban, you see, are the ones who have no incentive actually.
Okay.
They are all celebrating their, the coming victory, because you see, the point is they know that the Americans are going to leave the, the country along with the other Western allies in September. So why should they come in? What is their incentive? And in any case, you see, they may have pretended to be interested in, they are not interested in sharing power in any case.
Okay.
They are not interested in democratic process. They are not interested in elections. They are interested in imposing their brand of, Islamic, sort of a jihad on this country, which has seen better days. They are a Muslim country, but they would not like to be ruled by the Taliban. There are very terrible memories of Taliban.
Okay.
You see, when you go to Afghanistan and you talk to the people who have seen their regime, they are absolutely frightened and petrified that they'll have to suffer this, and especially the women folk. You see, at this moment, you find that the women folk have had the education actually last 20 years. They are taking part in the bureaucracy, in the politics. All this, they'll be again locked up. You see, the education itself will suffer. The gains which they have made will suffer. So it's a scenario which arouses one's empathy and sympathy for them.
Okay. I'll just ask you to hold your thoughts. The MEA has reacted. Let me just read out that reactions there from what the MEA has reacted. The MEA has reacted on the announcement by the US on the withdrawal of its troops from Afghanistan before September 11th. It says, and I quote, "We have noted the decision of the United States to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan and to end its military operations there. We are closely following the ongoing intra-Afghan peace process. Afghan people have seen more than 4 decades of war and unrest and deserve long-lasting peace and development. India is of the view that an Afghan peace process should be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled. Any political settlement must be inclusive and should preserve the socio-economic and political gains of the past 19 years. India supports a united, democratic and sovereign Afghanistan. We are deeply concerned about the increase in violence and targeted killings in Afghanistan. India has called for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire. India has participated in the Doha Conference, the Geneva Conference, and recently the Heart of Asia Conference in Dushanbe. India remains engaged with the Afghan stakeholders and also our regional and international partners regarding next steps." Well, my question, just when you read what the External Affairs Ministry has clearly stated, how do regional partners or regional countries help Afghanistan, create that picture of peace and stability from here on?
You see, as long as there is sincerity, as long as there is empathy for the Afghan people, like we have, and we are absolutely forthright in that. I think as the MEA has brought out, if it is an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned process, we are for it. But if the some of the regional entities are keen to disrupt it and usurp the power, then of course it will lead to chaos. So regional countries have a role. Regional countries have a role if they join together to have the country settled, to have this country remain democratic. You see, for this country to have government of their choice, for this government to also continue to have the liberal values which has been inculcated in them for last 20 years.
Okay.
If there are disruptors around the regional powers who like to impose a type of governance on these people, which is fundamentalist in nature, which has been rejected by these people.
Okay.
We would like to say that if Taliban have to come in, let them fight the election. Let them come after due process of being elected. And that is the process these people would like to choose. But if the regional powers themselves, some of them, have different views, then it will be difficult. But let's hope that sense prevails. And I think India will be taking a leading role in making sure that there is a possibility of peace and ceasefire. The violence must stop. Every third day or fourth day, you have 10, 20, 40 people killed. You look at the psychological effect it has on the population. In my view, and I think in the view of India, and very correctly brought out by the MEA and the foreign minister, we feel that Afghans deserve a better life. They deserve a democratic life. They deserve a life where they can educate their own children. They can live in peace, and things are not imposed on them.
Okay.
Their ideology is not imposed them, which restricts their, sense of well-being and and their freedom of action, etc. And they should be free to choose the government they want to.
Somewhere do you feel that, the Biden administration, unlike the Trump administration, when it talked about a timeline to withdrawal, they had conditions before they withdrew. And do you somewhere feel, the Biden administration leaves it with no conditions? They have said September 11, the date we decide to pull out, but no conditions there. Does that make it, a battlefield open for all?
I think it does, because you see, the point is that I wish they had imposed the conditions, but I think in a way, there are lots of differing opinions in the administration itself. And I think the one part, which is the dominant part, feels that if you leave conditions, they will not be fulfilled, and which will delay the process of withdrawal. So I think in a way, their political compulsions and their own, thinking is to leave this strife, the area where they have lost a lot of people. But I wish very much that it was done with conditions imposed, because their going away and leaving the arena leaves a field open for things to happen to this country, which India as a friend, as a neighbor, and as an empathizer and a sympathizer would not like to happen to this country.
Okay, looking at one final word before I let you, looking at the way the neighbors have reacted to this particular story, do you somewhere feel, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had indicated somewhere in March that a UN peacekeeping force comes into play to handle the situation that the US wants to pull out. Do you see a possibility of that now gaining, further ground, considering the developments that have taken place?
I think, yes, of course, there is a distinct possibility, and the UN troops, when they come in, they will have to come in a very big, substantial, number.
Okay.
And the UN troops will also have to be given a different type of a mandate for peace enforcement. I don't know whether people have the stomach for it or not. I'm afraid the UN role in the other countries has not been very, heartening. But I don't know, there is no other option, because if the UN has to come in, the troops have to come in number, and the troops have to be given a proper mandate. I think that probably is the only way out. And I hope that a decision, when it is taken, the empowerment of the UN troops who come there and their equipment, etc., will be looked into properly.
Okay.
So that they can do the task what they are doing, rather than being the ceremonial soldiers.
Okay.
Ceremonial UN soldiers in this strife-ridden area would be a disaster.
Okay. Okay, we'll wait and watch how developments takes place, especially when it comes to peace in Kabul and Afghanistan at large. Thank you and appreciate you joining us this evening on World Today. Well, moving forward to our next story, that's from the United States, where another shooting has rocked the United States. This time, a gunman shot 8 people dead and injured several others at a FedEx facility in Indianapolis before taking his own life. More in this report.
Another shooting rocked the United States. This time, a gunman shot 8 people dead and injured several others at a FedEx facility in Indianapolis before taking his own life.
We don't feel that there is an active threat to the community at this time. We have multiple people with injuries consistent with gunshot wounds. We have others that have been transported to various hospitals throughout the area. We are asking that if you have family members that work at FedEx and you have not been able to make contact with them, and you are responding out here, that you go to the Holiday Inn Express located at 8555 Stansted Drive. IMPD chaplain's office, along with several others, will be at that location to assist. Out of respect for the family members that are involved, we'll be back shortly for additional information.
The incident occurred at a FedEx facility in Mirabel Road, Indianapolis, late on April 15th, according to the police. The facility is located close to the Indianapolis International Airport. Visuals showed victims' families, friends and workmates all with face masks on due to the pandemic, and most holding their mobile phones at a family unification center set up by authorities in a nearby hotel. United States has been rocked by deadly shootings of late. President Joe Biden and his Attorney General Merrick Garland announced limited measures to tackle gun violence in the United States on April 8th. In what the White House described as a first step to curb mass shootings, community bloodshed and suicides. The new measures include plans for the Justice Department to crack down on self-assembled ghost guns and make stabilizing braces which effectively turn pistols into rifles subject to registration under the National Firearms Act. Biden said he will also ask the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives to release an annual report on firearms trafficking in the United States and make it easier for states to adopt red flag laws that flag at risk individuals who own guns.
Want to rein in the proliferation of so-called ghost guns. These are guns that are homemade, built from a kit, that include directions on how to finish the firearm. You can go buy the kit. They have no serial numbers, so when they show up at a crime scene, they can't be traced. And the buyers aren't required to pass a background check to buy the kit, to make the gun. Consequently, anyone from a criminal to a terrorist can buy this kit in as little as 30 minutes, put together a weapon. You know, I want to see these kits treated as firearms under the Gun Control Act.
While US was trying to move on after two deadly shootings, another mass shooting rocked the United States. Scars of Atlanta, Colorado and Los Angeles shooting are still afresh for families of those who lost their loved ones. Three deadly mass shootings rocked the United States in less than a month. At least 30 people have been killed in mass shooting incidents around the country in the last month. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, United States announced sanctions against Russia and the expulsion of 10 diplomats on April 15th. Russia has also reacted. Let's take a look at this report.
In yet another major move, the United States announced sanctions against Russia and the expulsion of 10 diplomats on the 15th of April. US imposed a broad array of sanctions on Russia, including curbs to its sovereign debt market, to punish it for interfering in last year's US election, cyber hacking, bullying Ukraine, and other alleged malign actions. They blacklisted Russian companies, expelled Russian diplomats, and barred US banks from buying sovereign bonds from Russia's central bank, National Wealth Fund, and Finance Ministry. The United States warned Russia that more penalties were possible but said it did not want to escalate. President Joe Biden said that now is the time to de-escalate tensions.
I was clear with President Putin that we could have gone further, but I chose not to do so. I chose to be proportionate. The United States is not looking to kick off a cycle of escalation and conflict with Russia. We want a stable, predictable relationship. If Russia continues to interfere with our democracy, I'm prepared to take further actions to respond. Now is the time to de-escalate. The way forward is through thoughtful dialogue and diplomatic process. The U.S. is prepared to continue constructively to move toward that process.
And after this came a reaction from Russia. Russia denies meddling in US elections, orchestrating a cyber hack that used US technology company SolarWinds Corporation to penetrate US government networks, and using a nerve agent to poison Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Russia's foreign ministry reacted angrily, summoning the US ambassador, and said a series of retaliatory measures will follow soon.
Ответ на санкции будет неотвратимым.
The response to the sanctions will be unavoidable. Washington must realize that they have to pay for the deterioration of bilateral relations. The United States of America are fully responsible for what is happening. I would also like to say that the Russian Foreign Ministry has summoned the US ambassador. We will share with you additional information on the outcome of this conversation, which will be uneasy for the US side.
По итогам этого разговора, который...
The sanctions represent the first retaliatory action announced against the Kremlin for last year's hack, familiarly known as the SolarWinds breach. President Biden had warned Russian President Vladimir Putin about the sanctions during a telephonic conversation. How the sanctions will actually impact Russia remains to be seen. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, the foreign ministers of Turkey and Greece clashed openly on Thursday at a joint news conference in Ankara that began with hopes of improved relations but quickly descended into an acrimonious accusations from both sides. Seeking to ease months of tension over territorial disputes in the eastern Mediterranean, Greek Foreign Minister Nikos Denias met the Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan and Foreign Minister in the first visit by either side since their navies came close to fighting last year. The two countries are allies in NATO but at odds over many issues such as competing claims over the extent of their continental shelves in the Mediterranean, airspace, energy resources, ethically split Cyprus and the status of some islands in the Aegean. Tensions flared last summer when Turkey sent a drilling ship to contested Mediterranean waters but have eased slightly after Ankara withdrew the vessel and the countries resumed bilateral talks over the disputes following a 5-year hiatus. Turkish Foreign Minister rejected the charge. However, both sides said they want to continue to try and resolve their differences through dialogue. Well, taking a look at COVID numbers worldwide, more than 13 crore 98 lakh people worldwide have so far tested positive for COVID-19, while over 11 crore 88 lakh people have recovered from coronavirus. Well, the deadly virus has so far claimed 30 lakh lives. That's 30 lakh 2,476 lives world over. United States worst affected from the pandemic, both in terms of infections as well as fatalities. In terms of infections, 3 crore 22 lakh patients of COVID-19, while over 5 lakh 79,000 deaths being reported from United States of America. Well, shifting to South America and Brazil in particular, where the hospitals in Brazil on Thursday were running out of drugs needed to sedate patients, with reports of those seriously ill being tied and intubated without effective sedatives. Brazil is one of the countries hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Aid groups MSF says Brazil's failed response had led to thousands of avoidable deaths and created a humanitarian catastrophe that could still get worse. Brazil has so far reported over 1 crore 37 lakh 58,000 COVID-19 cases, while the deadly virus has claimed over 3 lakh 65,000 lives. Hospitals in the country are running at a war footing to treat patients. Despite the rising number of COVID-19 cases and deaths, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has opposed lockdowns. He has only recently embraced vaccines as a possible solution. Well, top U.S. infectious disease Dr. Anthony Fauci on Thursday said he hopes U.S. regulators will make a quick decision to lift a pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and get it back on track. Earlier this week, a panel of advisors to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention delayed a vote on whether to resume the Johnson & Johnson shots for at least a week until it had more data on the risk. The U.S. has decided to pause distribution of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to investigate 6 cases of a rare brain blood clot linked to the low platelet count in the blood.
I hope they make the conclusion of this quickly and get back on track. I hope so, and I believe they will. I believe that ultimately it will get back on track. I hope it does, but from what I've seen, I believe that it will, but I'm going to have to leave that to the regulatory authorities. That's not my decision. But once it does, I think we just got to continue to emphasize that this is a very efficacious vaccine and could be used and be very, very valuable on the global scene.
Well, India take on Latvia. They are the higher-ranked team in their first-ever Billie Jean King Cup playoff tie. The matches will be played on indoor hardcourt courts in an empty stadium. First up on court will be Ankita Raina, who becomes the 5th Indian woman to make the main draw of a major at the Australian Open against the 2017 French Open champion Elena Ostapenko. Latvia's top-ranked player Anastasia Sevastova will go next in the singles against Carmen Thandi. Well, British number 1 Dan Evans claimed the biggest win of his career by beating Novak Djokovic in the last 16 of the Monte Carlo Masters. Evans, who had struggled on clay in recent times, started superbly against the world number 1, breaking him in the first 2 service games. He was able to wrap up the opening set before Djokovic fought back at the start of the second. But Evans recovered and held his nerve to wrap up the match in straight sets 6-4, 7-5. On to football, Manchester United defeated Granada to book their berth in the semi-finals of the UEFA Europa League. Marcus Rashford's fine goal and a late Bruno Fernandes penalty in Spain last week put the Red Devils in control of their quarter-final tie. With this win, United have reached their 18th semi-final in all-European competition. Only Liverpool have appeared in more among the English sides. Well, Arsenal, meanwhile, turned on in style to ease past Slavia Prague and set up an Europa League semi-final against Spanish club Villarreal. With the tie finally poised following a 1-1 home draw a week ago, the Gunners put in one of their best showings under Mikel Arteta to win 4-0 in Prague. Nicolas Pepe opened the scoring as his fine Europa League campaign continued, with Lazate's brace and a Saka strike more than enough to see the English club through to the semi-final. Well, after sports, let's take a look at some other stories in our News at a Glance segment.
Four people were killed and 20 wounded in a car bomb attack in Iraq in Sadr city neighborhood of Baghdad, Iraqi police said in a statement. The car was parked at a busy second-hand equipment market. Black smoke rose from the marketplace after the blast and ambulances rushed to save the wounded. Police cordoned off the site of the blast shortly afterwards. There was no immediate claim of the responsibility for the attack. It was the second big deadly bombing to hit Baghdad this year after a suicide attack claimed by Islamic State militants killed at least 32 people in a crowded market in January. Military jets and helicopters flew in formation over Israel on Thursday as the country marked its Independence Day free of coronavirus restrictions than a year ago. The customary barbecue and beach holiday celebrations were back in evidence for families who were locked down under a mandatory curfew in 2020. The celebrations for the 73rd anniversary of Israel's 1948 independence provided a moment of national unity for a polarized Israeli electorate less than a month after a fourth inconclusive election in 2 years. Ahead of Independence Day, the Central Bureau of Statistics issued updated population figures of 9.327 million, of which 6.894 million are Jewish and 1.966 million Arab, with 5% others. At least 50 homes were destroyed in a fire that broke out in a poor neighborhood in the Kimbote district of Peru's Ancash region on Wednesday. Residents and firefighters continue to struggle to bring the blaze under control. Some of the residents have lost everything they owned, with their homes razed to the ground. As per local media reports, the fire was caused by a faulty electricity cable. No injuries were reported. Authorities were investigating the exact cause of the fire. In Germany, several thousand people took part in a spontaneous protest march against the lifting of the Berlin rent cap in Berlin on Thursday evening. On posters and banners, the protesters called for affordable housing and the expropriation of large housing companies. The Berlin rent cap was unique in Germany. On February 23, 2020, rents for 1.5 million apartments were frozen for 5 years at the level of June 2019. But the constitutional judges unanimously declared the law null and void and upheld the lawsuit of 284 members of the Bundestag of the Union and the FDP. Protesters in a town in southwest Myanmar floated dozens of colorful clusters of balloons laced with anti-coup messages on Friday. The protesters wrote messages like "We want democracy" on the balloons Friday is the 4th day of the 5-day traditional Buddhist New Year holiday known as Thingyan. Most people this year are shunning the usual festivities to focus on their campaign against the generals who overthrew Suu Kyi's government and locked her up, and many others. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, let's now take a look at why this day is relevant in history.
On April 16 in the year 1912, Harriet Quimby, the first American woman to gain a pilot's license, became the first female to fly a plane across the Channel from England to France. In 1911, she was awarded a US pilot certificate by the Aero Club of America. On the same day in year 1951, the British submarine Afrique sank in the English Channel. The incident claimed at least 75 lives. HMS Afrique was the last Royal Navy submarine to be lost at sea. It was one of 16 submarines of its class which were originally designed for use in the Pacific Ocean against Japan. An Italian court found former Prime Minister Bettino Craxi guilty of corruption and sentenced him to 8 years and 3 months in prison on the same day in year 1996. He was an Italian politician, leader of the Italian Socialist Party from 1976 to 1993. On the same day in year 2002, trade unions brought much of Italy to a halt as they staged their first full-day general strike in 20 years to protest against government labour reforms. Millions of workers took part in the national walkout to voice their opposition to the government's plan. In year 2002, on the very same day, the Dutch cabinet resigned en masse over an official report condemning the Netherlands' failure to prevent the Srebrenica massacre. The massacre was the worst atrocity of the Bosnian War. World Today Desk, DD India.
Well, now we get you some stories that make news but not headlines in our segment.
After being shut for a year, Universal Studios Hollywood has finally opened its door to visitors amid coronavirus pandemic. Though the park will see its official opening today, annual season pass holders were allowed inside the park yesterday. Visitors can experience many of the rides and eat at the restaurants, although some rides and indoor restaurants remain closed. What would be your favorite choice for a pet? A dog? A cat maybe? But a couple in Russia has adopted a puma cub. Alexandra and Maria Dmitriev have been fostering the cub named Messi for the past 5 years. Messi was named after the famous Argentinian soccer player, born in a zoo and later sold to a petting zoo in Russian city of Penza. The couple, who are both psychologists living in Penza, bought the exotic cat from petting zoo after they spotted it.
Well, that's all we have time for in this edition of World Today. Remember, the fight against COVID-19 continues. A simple step that I ask each and every one of our viewers to follow, that's follow SMS. Sanitize yourself, mask yourself, maintain social distancing. So do not forget that as you step out of your house, because you not only care for yourself but also your loved ones. But the larger picture that one looks at is we all care for humanity at large. So do not forget to do that. Follow the simple step of SMS as you step out as the battle against COVID-19 continues. That's it from me and my team. Thanks for watching. Have a nice and wonderful evening ahead. Bye-bye.